Thank you for joining us on the broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. Since this morning at 1:30, early morning, Saturday morning, 1:30, this report, which I have in my hand, it's a 15-page report, came into our newsrooms and it was uploaded on the AAIB website. Now, this is a report that tells us what happened with Air India 171, but it doesn't tell us why that plane crashed or why it happened. It tells us that emergency mechanisms kicked in, engines failed, and that the fuel switch went from run to cut off, and there was nothing absolutely that the pilots could do because both even discussed it. And we have with us on the broadcast to discuss this report this evening, we have Parvez Damania, who's joining us on the broadcast. Parvez Damania is a former director of Kingfisher Airlines and also founder of Damania Airways. Captain Minu Wadia will be joining us. Captain Minu Wadia is an ex-Indian Air Force and also an Air India pilot. He's also an aviation expert. And this evening, we have Captain Randhawa, who's a senior Boeing pilot, has extensive commercial flying experience, has been the president, Federation of Indian Pilots, a key voice for Indian airline pilots, and Dr. Vandana Singh, an aviation expert, joining us on the show this evening. And let's go straight to the report and what the report says part by part. And I'd like to start with Captain Minu Wadia, who had very, very strong views this morning. Captain Minu Wadia, cascading failures, one after the other, emergency mechanisms moments after takeoff, and then you have both engines failing. And then, there is so much packed into this report that sometimes even most experts are saying that we don't know what to make of this report. When you read this report this morning, what did you make of it, sir? So I think you're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, that's okay now.
Yeah,
yes.
I can hear you.
The report is fairly clear and we can decipher it fairly accurately. But before we go into the report, just mention that there are many channels, TV channels, where foreign pilots have been actually going out of the way to misguide the public and to give a wrong impression, as if the pilots have made a mistake and they're the ones who are at fault also. So therefore, they're making ridiculous statements. So please be careful of what you hear from many of the channels from abroad to start.
So we haven't called any such pilots. We haven't called those pilots. We're happy with the Indian view, sir. We're happy with the Indian perspective. Thank you, sir.
Yes, they're on various channels also and on social media also, making totally ridiculous statements. Okay, now what has actually happened, what we do know for a fact is both engines failed immediately after takeoff. Now, why this has failed is a matter of understanding and more investigation and to find out. Now, let us presume a few things which have been going on various channels, that the pilots put off the switches, fuel switches, which is not correct at all. First of all, these switches are not like a household switch that you switch on something and the fan goes on, or put on another switch and the light goes on. These are fail-safe switches which are protected and guarded. So unless you want to make a physical attempt to put on or off these switches, you cannot do it by mistake to start with. So therefore, people are misguided again by the questions asked in the cockpit. What happened is immediately after the takeoff, the pilots realized that the engines had failed and there was no power available. So a perfectly logical question. One asked the others, did you do something? Did you put off the switches? The other person said, no, I have not done anything. So therefore, the pilots have not put off the switches at that point in time, which is presumed by some. However, if you ask, did they do it? Yes, they did it. But when did they do it? When the actual engines had failed and did not restart. That was a normal practice which is taught to you in the simulator, which is taught to all pilots also. To relight the failed engine, what they did is put the switches, fuel switches, physically off, and in less than a second, they put the switches on again. So, and when they did that, there was a momentary light up in the number one engine, and number two engine didn't have enough time to light up. Now, you must also understand that any of these large aircrafts, going from zero thrust to full power, takes a lot of time, minimum 8 to 10 seconds for the engines to rev up and for the power to be available. And as far as the switches are concerned, if you see the report, in the report it's also very clearly mentioned, but some people tend to misread that as both the fuel switches were, after the crash also, they were found to be on, and the fuel throttles fully extended. So the pilots have taken the right decisions, have taken the right actions, yet the engines have flamed out.
Yeah.
Now, why this has flamed out? Let me just clarify a little bit on these switches also. These switches are again not hardwired by going by some cable to the fuel system to give fuel to the engines, etc. They are through a very elaborate process of electronics, electrical systems, and computerized this thing. So the switches give an input to a computer, which again feeds it later on to the fuel system, which feeds the engines, etc. So therefore, if a system has failed in between, either by itself, by a system failure, or there has been an intervention, and I wouldn't rule out the possibility. We do not have any evidence to show that there is a sabotage involved, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility of sabotage also, because a lot of things do not make sense that is actually available on the FDR and the voice recorder.
Yeah.
So therefore, as far as the switches are concerned, the pilots have done everything correctly.
Yeah. Before I go across to Parvez Damania, I want to get in a pilot's perspective, Parvez Damania, and I'm coming to you. Captain Randhawa had very strong views this morning as well, because there are some sections, Captain Randhawa, some of them, and especially, one expert called them hired white skin experts coming on channels and trying to blame it on pilot error. We know that powerful lobbies are at play here. Let's not discount that. Some trying to, shield the big players, the big names. We don't have to go over that. But some tried to hint at a pilot error. There are cascading failures in this. There is a rat mechanism that kicked in immediately after takeoff. Everything is fine till the takeoff. The moment the flight takes off, there is an emergency mechanism kicking in. And then suddenly the switch goes off to a cut-off position from run. They try to bring it back on. It's too late. It's not responding, right? Engines have failed. And then you have this report also make a fleeting mention of the thrust being in idle. We don't know whether that happened after the crash or it was before the crash. Now, going by the black box recordings as well. Now, all of this combined, the reason why I'm being a little elaborate in my question is all of this indicate that there is no pilot error. There can be no pilot error because they cross-checked with each other according to this report. Did you switch off or did you cut off? Others said, no, I did not cut off. I didn't do it, right? Now, what do you say to these people, sir, who try to blame pilots?
First of all, I would like to intervene, and I've been quite upset about people making, some of the panelists making accusations without any evidence that it's a pilot error. The report is very clear, in which they have clearly mentioned that there is transitioning. They have not said that the fuel control switches have been put to cut off and to run. They have said it is transition. Now, what does transition mean? There could have been an electrical problem in the aircraft systems, because one thing is very clear: when the aircraft has lifted off, they have not described the health of the engine. That once the aircraft has got airborne, within 9 seconds, it has gained a speed of 180 knots. During this time, there has been some problem because the landing gear has not been taken up by the pilots. The flaps have been found in the takeoff position. The aircraft was not overweight. These things all have been ruled out. There is no bird hit. There is no fire. Now, when the CVR has been analyzed, it has not been appropriately addressed that which pilot is saying. The pilot flying in this case was the co-pilot, Captain Clive, and pilot monitoring was the pilot in command, Captain Sabharwal. Now, who is talking? From the CVR, it should have been clearly brought out. And thirdly, the memory actions which the Boeing company suggests in case of a dual engine flameout is fuel control switches to cut off and then to run. Now, whenever you do these deliberate actions, there is challenge and response. The pilot flying says fuel control switch left. The pilot monitoring says left, affirm. The pilot monitoring will then cut off this engine. So he'll say cut off. The other person will say cut off. So both, it is challenge and response. It is not silently things are happening in the cockpit and people will be, and no one plays around with the fuel control switches. Only in 3 exigencies you touch those switches. One is a dual engine failure. The second one is engine fire. And the third one is when there is severe damage to the engine or the engine has stalled. So in these 3 cases, you do that action. The next thing is very important. The Boeing came out with an advisory circular on 17th of December 2018.
Correct.
In which on the 737, it was felt that there was a malfunction in the locking mechanism of the fuel control switches. This was not made as a directive and mandatory. The Boeing company, if it was so concerned at that stage, they should have ensured that on the 737s, 777s, the 787, they should have got the aircraft checked, which was not done because it was advisory in nature. So any airline in the world will not take it seriously. So it is not clear from the report as to what is the health monitoring of the engines after it lifted off. And the second part is that what has transpired in the aircraft on the CVR, that is not very, very clear. Thirdly, I do not appreciate people who are not SMEs on the subject and commenting as a pilot error.
Yeah.
That is highly objectionable without any evidence of whatsoever. And both the pilots, they were highly trained. Captain Sabharwal had more than 8,000 hours of flying experience. I have trained him on the Airbus 310. A very good pilot. Total hours, more than 15,600. He was a Czech pilot, a line training captain, we call him. And the first officer was adequately trained, and he was doing the takeoff. So I do not succumb to this theory that the pilots were playing with the fuel control switches.
Yeah.
So the report also clearly says transitioning. So transitioning could be some electronic glitch in the EEC and the FedEx, or the power transfer when it is taken place when the aircraft has transitioned from ground mode to air mode.
Yeah.
There could be some glitch, or it has picked up, the DFDR has picked up a signal that the fuel control switch has gone to off and then to run without the switch physically moved.
Yeah.
Pilots could only move these switches only in case there was a dual engine flame out and the RAT was deployed.
Yeah.
The second action, if you see in the checklist, is that fuel control switches can run, and second is manually you put the RAT switch on to ensure that the RAT is deployed. Now, the report is silent on the RAT switch also. So in case it was a double engine flame out, and if the pilots had moved it, then what about the second action? Though the RAT is deployed, but is the switch on? That was the second memory action.
Yeah. Sir, I'll tell you one critical point that you made, right, which was also echoed by, in fact, Devesh Agarwal came with a very big breaking update. I'll go to that next. I want to go to Parvez Damania because one mention that you fleetingly made here, sir, of the FAA issuing the Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin, very critical, December 2018, mentioning potential disengagement of fuel control switch locking feature. Specifically to Air India, Parvez Damania, this interesting paragraph also makes a very fleeting mention, one line about Air India saying, as per information from Air India, suggested inspections were not carried out as SAIB was advisory and not mandatory. Now here's a trick. Here's a tricky aspect. My colleague Harsha, a few minutes back, broke a story that on the 7th of July, Air India gave out engineering instructions asking for, let me get that out. I have a breaking news update that she just put out a very fleeting mention, though we want to wait for Air India's response to that, but I'll tell you what they did. They sent out a mail asking for fuel distribution left and right engine fuel spar valve control relay and wiring location change, 7th of July 2025, aircraft type B777. exactly what Captain Randhawa just mentioned. Now my question is, if they're acting now, they had all the warnings, the writing on the wall from 2018, 2020, 2021. Now these warnings have been coming in, notices have been coming in. Do you think this is a sign of what we've been discussing about Air India all along? Your reading of this report, sir?
First and foremost, if you see the report at length, there is no mention of any fault of Air India. On the contrary, the report states that the entire protocol from the time the pilots came till the takeoff, Air India maintained the entire protocol. As a matter of fact, it also mentions that there was a snag when it reached Ahmedabad. The snag was corrected and the pilot accepted the aircraft.
Yeah.
The other shocking part is, like I was talking on the other show, on the page 15,
yes,
at this stage of investigation, there are no recommended actions against Boeing 787 and GE engines operators and manufacturers.
Yes.
It's in a very indirect way, Air India, in a very indirect way, Boeing and GE, the manufacturer of the engine, has been given a green card, They are let off in a way. There has been no report because I think no pilot, like Captain said before, these pilots were very experienced, very knowledgeable. On the contrary, if you go to page 11, the entire biodata and the experience of the pilots have been given. The pilots on what aircraft they've been trained in, that's given. On type, how many hours they've given. A very detailed report of the experience of the pilots has been given. No pilot with this kind of training and this kind of knowledge is going to play around with the fuel cutoff switch.
Yes.
The fuel cutoff switch is used only in extreme conditions and extreme emergencies. So people know, and the fuel cutoff switch is not a kind of switch where you can touch by hand, or a bathroom switch which can go on and off by mistake. It's a very deliberate action, like a lever where you pull and lock the system in. So there must have been a very, very clear, if the pilots operated the fuel cutoff switch, there must have been a very, very clear and a definite reason why the pilots operated the switch. So I think it is time we looked into the actions of Boeing, the performance of the Boeing. Boeing also gave a report, I heard, that Boeing's response was, we are going to cooperate with the probe, but we are no way responsible. So let's remember, we are against a very, very powerful lobby. Boeing, Honeywell, GE. Just to give you an idea, Honeywell is a 38.5 billion turnover, GE is 39.68, and Boeing is $69.44 billion turnover. So these are giants that have huge amount of power and sway. So in a way, the report has sort of let off Boeing. I think Boeing should be absolutely held responsible. So many people have died. What action has been taken? Just by distributing the insurance money, the problem doesn't disappear. People's lives have been destroyed, families have been destroyed. The government needs to act and move very firmly against Boeing and find if their responsible action should be taken. Yeah. Criminal action should be taken, just not action. But I don't know if that will happen in India. In America also, Boeing has been pulled up a number of times. Serious deficiencies have been found. There are documentaries on Netflix, Amazon, available for everybody to see. The Boeing CEO was pulled up in the American Senate. He has admitted to false doing. So there have been issues, but these are giant corporations. I don't know if people will be able to pull them up, take actions. And again, the captains will agree today, the other major problem being that there are only two manufacturers left in the world, Boeing and Airbus. Yeah. So you either work with Boeing or Airbus, and no company can afford to not work with these two companies. So we are really in a situation where we have no alternative. But I think the government needs to probe further. I don't think the pilots are anywhere responsible. Even if they did switch off, there must have been a very, very, very specific reason. Otherwise, no pilot's going to take action like that. So one needs to investigate and go into further depth. This is a preliminary report. Let's see if later the detailed investigation report brings out and what it brings out.
Yeah. I'm getting in Devesh Agarwal and Dr. Vandana Singh now. Devesh Agarwal this morning, he had this very confidential document. I have a copy of that. The confidential document was issued in December 2020, revised in January 2021. It read GE designated confidential specifically for the BE 7878 series, and it specifically mentioned in this particular confidential note that it was a threat. It said that there could be a loss of thrust control, LOTC, which could occur, and hence suggested a few changes. Now, what did it ask for? It was a notice that was sent out, and in this service bulletin, they clearly mentioned, saying that a solder ball failure on the integrated circuit on the MCB could initiate a system effect that may result in a LOTC, loss of thrust control. This is a confidential document. Now, this is a service bulletin. It was shared. I'm assuming it was shared with everyone. Now, what I'm worried about is who acted on it and whether it was acted upon at all. Now, looking at the breaking news update that I had, that Air India is acting on B77 now on the 7th of July 2025. I don't know how many notices came in. I don't know how many warnings came in, right? But it does indicate that advisories / warnings / notices, Mr. Agarwal, were perhaps overlooked. That's also another investigation we should get into.
Well, that definitely. Thank you firstly for having me. And I must acknowledge that Dr. Vandana Singh more than a month ago said, it could be an issue with the FIDEC. So due apologies, ma'am. You were right. The point is that this particular service bulletin from GE talked about replacing the NM4 chip, which is on the main control board of the engine fuel system in the electronic engine control. And it says that the chip can be replaced up to 3 times, and if not, then the entire, the entire PCB, the motherboard, will have to be changed. This was issued in 2020. I think at that moment in time, Air India was under the control of the government. I don't think it had passed on to the Tatas. And I'm not sure, maybe that will require some investigation, but it is a bit surprising that the AAIB referred to a 2018 advisory circular from the FAA, but did not look at essentially almost like a mandatory circular from GE on this specific engine. It is a little surprising to me. Maybe they were not aware of it, or it will take some time to come out.
Or was it because GE was also one of the investigators? Or was it because GE also was one of the investigators?
Sir, GE is not
part of the investigation. Sorry,
they will participate as a technical subject matter expert. They will not be able. See, the AAIB is the lead investigation agency, and we know the names of the lead investigators, the head of the investigation team. So they will be the organization and the specific individuals. GE, Boeing will be subject matter experts. NTSB, UK AAIB, and the Portuguese, I think GPAAI, something like that, they will all be adding as subject matter experts because they are very familiar with those particular aircraft, etc. But this is a GE bulletin, and it specifically deals with the engine fuel. And I fully agree with the captain that, see, we are making an assumption just because the report says the fuel switch transitioned, that the pilots have moved it. The switch may be mechanical. Behind it, it is completely electrical and electronic. So for all you know, there was a short circuit. We have heard cases where pilots have spilled coffee in the throttle quadrant of the Airbus A350 and all kinds of hell has resulted. So is this something electronic? We don't know. Is it something to do with that service bulletin, the NM4 chip? That is what the investigation, should and will focus on future. Today, we have been told what happened. But why, where, when, how, that is what is going to come in the detailed investigation.
Yeah. My worry is, Vandana Singh, my worry is, and to everyone on this panel, and my question is to you, but you can speak to the entire panel. It's taken a month. The mandate was simple for the preliminary report. It had to come out within 30 days. It's come very interestingly, like one of my colleagues pointed out, it's come out at 1:30 a.m., exactly at the time when the US markets were closing over the weekend. So all's well on the US markets and the stocks for Boeing, right? But my worry is, I don't know when the final report is going to come out. And if had this happened in another country, Boeing would have been taken to the cleaners already. GE would have been taken to the cleaners already. Air India would be hung by the neck already. I don't know what is going to happen and how long 260 people and their families will have to wait for, and whether they'll get justice at all.
Indeed. First of all, thank you for having me on your show once again. I think all of us have been up since this report came out, which was waited in anticipation. And this is just a preliminary report. It's also shocking for me to see how fake news in the Western media is spreading, and how dare I use this word, how dare they talk about the pilots? Because I believe the pilots were absolutely competent. They were following the protocol. And how come this blame is shifting towards that side? This is not acceptable to me at all. I'm in agreement with all the panelists, the esteemed panelists here in this show, the captains who are talking, and also, sir, that you mentioned that 1 month back, exactly on 12th, I said this is a FADEC mandated, miscommand, electrical software glitch, because the incoming equipment, incoming aircraft was already showing the electrical error. So my question was on maintenance. My question was, how was this signed off? Why were the green ticks given? And now when you see this advisory, which was way back in 2018, this is a writing on the wall that they were waiting for 7 years for 2025 to happen, that nothing was done about this fuel switch lock mechanism, that nothing was looked into, and it was just taken as an advisory. Isn't an advisory as serious that you just delayed for 7 years? I don't understand this logic. The FADEC logic needs to be examined, and for God's sakes, we cannot blame our pilots. The pilots did everything they could, in my view. They, at 625 feet, can you imagine, they managed to start the engine 1. The engine 2 did not, which again shows the role of the FADEC. What exactly happened behind? How can we let Boeing go? How can we let GE go scot-free? And how come Air India will not answer this? This is my question, and I think there should be a criminal investigation, a judicial probe into this, because who's going to answer for all those lives that are gone and all those people who are fearing flying anymore? What about that? And I am surprised that there is no acknowledgement. I've been speaking to the Western media. There have been a couple of channels interviewing me, and nobody is talking about Boeing. This is shocking. For today afternoon, 737, we know what happened at Denver, mid-air fire, and nobody talks about Boeing. So my question is, we have to get to the bottom of it. We are a strong, resilient country. We need answers, and we cannot let them go scot-free. I don't think so. I think we need answers. I don't know how many billion-dollar companies they are. They have the shares. All of that. There's a trade deal that's going to be signed. Sure it is. But then what about the lives that have gone? I am furious about that. And how can they question our pilots? So, they did their best. And they died saying Mayday, 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 over and out, 6 seconds, and they died. Over to you, sir.
I'm going to ask all 5 panelists to, just one question to all 5 of you, and you can start with Parvez Damania and you can tell me. Do you think so far the report, the investigators, and you think there is a need to change the manner in which we are conducting this investigation? Do you think there is, Parvez Damania, do you think something is wrong in this investigation? Parvez Damania, I'll start with you.
First and foremost, the other captains who are more experienced, knowledgeable will agree that in America, when the investigation occurs, it's an open door investigation. Means every stage of investigation is put on the net for the public. In our case in India, it's a closed door investigation. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So only when the investigation was done was it given. At no stage the public was kept on information or given information how the probe is progressing, how it's progressing. I think people should be more. I think in America, if this was done, hell would have broken loose. People would have filed cases, issues would occur, and people would have been aware of every stage of investigation. It's good that the government has brought out the report within 30 days, but I think when the final report, to the best of my knowledge, it has to be done within a year. Yeah. So it's going to be a long time till we have a final detailed report.
Yeah, Captain Randhawa.
Yeah, I agree with all the panelists. that what we have come to a conclusion that Boeing, the GE, and Air India have been let off the
And
hook,
Honeywell.
and
And Honeywell.
inadvertently the blame is being passed on to the pilots. I fully agree with Vandana what she's saying, and in my analysis also, I figured that out that there is electrical glitch which, without the fuel control switches moved to cut off and to run position, there is some electrical malfunction which has taken place, which has cut off the fuel supply, cut off the engines, and trying to restart. Since the pilots have very clearly said that they have not moved the switches in the cockpit. So the inquiry needs to come out with all these factors and have some accountability from the Boeing company, from GE, from Honeywell, and Air India, of course.
Yeah. I want to.
That what did they do after 2018? What did they do?
Yeah. I want to ask Minu Wadia. Minu Wadia, what's your message to the investigators?
I'll just add to the points that have already been mentioned earlier. To start with, if you go by the report, this happened almost immediately after takeoff. Now, what happens? There is something called the squat switch on all the aircrafts. So when the aircraft is on ground, the indication is from the squat switch to all the electronic equipment and the computers on the aircraft that the aircraft is on ground and is not in the flight mode. In other words, to put it plainly, for example, if it's on ground, you cannot put the gear up and the aircraft, the gears will not go up. So this is a squat switch which has happened. Now, normal practice in any case, in any aircraft, is as soon as the aircraft has got airborne, the pilot says positive rate of climb and the gear up. This will happen in a couple of seconds. Now, the very fact that the gear has not been put up, it is not because they failed in doing this, their duty, but it is obviously not gone. And also further giving the fact that the RAT has already been deployed. So things have happened on their own in a few seconds of the aircraft taking off to start with. And what everyone has said very correctly, that the fuel switch is only an input to various systems that happen in the aircraft, electronic systems, electrical systems that activate the fuel system. Now, anything could have gone anywhere on the way, and there could be a malfunction. Also, I would not like to rule out, so far there is no evidence to that fact, but I would not like to rule out the possibility of sabotage also. Because how will so many things malfunction all of a sudden on its own? So all aspects have to be gone into, and yes, later on when we do more investigation, more facts will come out. And also it is not easy for anyone, like even Boeing may be a very powerful company.
Yeah.
There are so many other agencies involved. There's Air India involved, the pilots are involved, there are other agencies involved. They may not be part of the core committee of investigation, but they will all be available and you will not be able to hide anything from any agency. So the facts will come out eventually in any case.
Archana, Vandana, if you can summarize quickly in 30 seconds, what's your message to the investigators? Do you think there's a need for change in the manner in which they're looking at it?
Absolutely. Firstly, agreeing with all the panelists here on their views. It has to now become an open investigation, a deeper probe, and we have to put this up that this comes out in the open. It cannot be hidden from us, whether it's Boeing, whether it's Air India, whether it's GE, whether it's Honeywell. All stakeholders need to be taken to task. And we need answers. I think this is a national issue that we should make of it. Indians want answers over here. We need answers globally as well. But at the end of it, it has to be an open door or open book communication, not the way it's happening right now.
Yeah.
We really need to see the sequencing like we saw in the movie Sully. Why can't we do it like that?
Yeah. Last word to Devesh Agarwal. Were you surprised with this second last paragraph in page 15, the beautiful sentence here saying that there are no recommended actions to B7878 or GE Gen X-1B engine operators and manufacturers at this stage. Most of our experts are surprised that that line found a mention at this stage. Devesh Agarwal, Minu Wadia, I'll come to you for the last word. Okay, Devesh Agarwal, quickly, sir.
So I'm not very surprised at it. See, in a way, they are trying to also utilize American techniques. So for now, they're saying we have not found any obvious thing. I fully agree with everybody that this investigation has to be open. But the one thing I always advocate, the purpose of air accident investigation is not to find fault. It is to find the reason. Because today aviation is so safe, it has been paid in the form of blood of passengers and pilots and crew in previous crashes. I go back 40 years ago, we had Emperor Kanishka. That bombing directly led to the rule that every bag that goes on board an aircraft, whether in hand or in check-in, is X-rayed. When Pan Am 103 was bombed, that rule came that every bag will be matched to a passenger on board. So the focus of aviation or air accident investigation always has to be how to make the system safer. We can pin and assign blame after the fact. Let us first find the reason, because this is a situation where the eyes of the world are on our country. We are now the third largest aviation nation in the world. We are, I think, fourth or fifth in the global economies. We are rising in everybody's eyes, and we cannot be seen as a banana republic by the world. We have to do a professional investigation. It has to be an open investigation. And that's what I would urge the investigators to do.
Okay, last word, Captain Wadia.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify one thing, digressing a little from the main topic, since you asked the question of the AIB who's doing the investigation. To start with, for more than 50 years, we've been trying to insist on the government of India to have an independent safety board. Well, we've made some progress. This AIB has been set up, but it is still not an independent safety board. But at least it's something better than nothing. And to give you the impression what is actually happening in reality, say when the Chakri-Dadri mid-air collision that took place, we had warned the government that this would happen, and we gave them suggestions for corrective action, but nothing was done, and the crash did take place. And earlier, all these investigations were investigated by either some judge or some bureaucrat. And to start with, when we started this Federation of Indian Pilots, in the whole office of the DGCA, there was not a single aviator. Not a single aviator. So I would suggest that we have moved forward, but not sufficiently, as many of the countries who have a good independent safety board, their accident report is much better than ours, and we must try and have a totally independent safety board with qualified people who are trained in accident analysis. And it's I can go into talk about this very subject for hours, but it's a very detailed and a very comprehensive subject.
So, I'd like to thank all five of you for, first of all, being with us through the day. Parvez Damania, Mr. Agarwal, Captain Wadia, Captain Randhawa, and Dr. Vandana Singh. Appreciate you joining us here on Republic through the day and for giving us your voice at the end of the day as we end this broadcast almost 16 or 17 hours later. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on the broadcast.